Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Astrology Channel. This is the show where we talk about the planetary days of the week coming up. This time we're going to be talking about the week of July 22nd. And so today I'm here with my good friend, Kyle Pierce. Hi, Kyle.
Hello, Joji.
So here is the first day of our week. Of course, as always, it's Monday, and boy, is she ever busy. Like, I think this day is one of the busiest ones for Lady Moon. So the moon is in Aquarius. She's out of her element. She's departing a Venus opposition and a Jupiter trine. And the moon is also peregrine. And she is about to be received by a Mercury opposition and Jupiter's term and Mercury's decan. This one really hit home for me because one of the cards that I've been pulling very consistently is the Six of Swords, which is a card that is linked to the decan that the moon is in today. The thing I was sitting with for this day is really the departure of these really positive, benefic aspects. Although the moon was opposing Venus, it's still Venus, and Venus will do Venus. And the trine to Jupiter, I think, is also helpful. But the moon is moving away from those and setting off into a journey that is both unknown, mysterious, somewhat difficult, because like I said, she's peregrine, and the next planet that she's going to conjoin with will be Saturn. So it really is like we're leaving this very positive space and heading towards uncertainty with a tinge of difficulty. If we consider that the moon's journey started with the whole Jupiter-Venus thing, the journey starts from a place of support. But then as we lose that support, it's really up to us on how we're going to manage those resources that we received. And I think that that's really the challenge of today. As you can see in the image, the moon is in the background and she's walking forward into this mysterious path. But she's also dropping a lot of the coins that she received from Venus and Jupiter. And I think that that's the danger of today, because moon being peregrine can also be the sense of like, I don't really know how to use these resources. Like, it's great that I have them. But things are so foreign and strange, especially in Aquarius, that it might be easy to misuse some of these boons. What are you feeling, Kyle?
Yeah, well, I think what's nice is depending on where you are in the world, there's a nice moment where the moon is separating from the trine with Jupiter and applying the opposition with Venus in like a real tight little enclosure, I guess. It could be like a sweet spot for something, but I think like the general theme is kind of like what you said. It's obviously last week was pretty sort of rough week, and then a lot of sign changes. Like Mars is in Gemini now. Sun went into Leo, like a big polarity shift too, like things moving into more active signs. The general like atmosphere has shifted post full moon, and the moon's like starting to wind down, but it's in Aquarius where it's like, yeah, there's like a sort of welcome to the new weird reality that you don't understand yet. You know, everything's different now. The language of the world is different. Paradigms are shifting, and you don't really know what those mean yet. The moon does eventually get into its own decan in the last decan of Aquarius, which even if only as like a symbolic message, what the moon sort of excels at there is like finding the sweet spot, like kind of settling into the benefits of living in a place that is not well trodden. It's the United States moon placement. And part of what made the Americans successful is that like, oh, like we haven't lived here for hundreds of years polluting the environment, and there's all this land available, and we could have like tons and tons of kids. There's like a possibility that is being opened up with the paradigm shift.
Yeah. And to that, what do you feel like in the difficulty scale? Where are we sitting today?
I mean, I think it's pretty nice, actually. It's like low end.
Let's go with a 2 difficulty, but then as far as agency goes, where would you?
I guess. Or 2 or 3.
So we're settling with 2 difficulty and 2 agency then for today.
Yeah, maybe 2.5, maybe. You know.
Yeah, I feel that.
I like it. I think it's nice.
Cool. Right. So let's move on to our next day. So we have Mars now in Gemini, out of his element. He is a peregrine in Mercury's terms in Jupiter's decan, and receiving a Sun sextile. And this is really nice because the Sun sextile to Mars kind of colors the whole week. We really don't get to see it be super concretized until we get to Sunday, but it's really nice that that actually gets to happen on Sunday. But it's really nice to have Mars in a more collaborative situation, especially with the ruler of the season at hand. Kyle was talking about having really well-situated luminaries and how that sometimes can give you a level of centeredness where even if there's issues, you still have like a really nice, what was it that you said? It was like a really nice base level, I think you said, or something along those lines. Yeah, baseline.
Mind and body yourself and deal with whatever.
Yeah, totally. And I think that the Mars sextile really contributes to that in a nice way. Yes, it's Mars peregrine and kind of trying to figure out what to do after all of that Uranus nonsense. But on the other hand, collaboration is always good, especially coming from Mars, because Mars can be a really good team player if we're all on the same side. And I think that it looks like the Sun and Mars are on the same side of things, especially both being in masculine signs. If we look at even the Sun and where it is, Mars is in the 11th house relationship to the Sun. So I think collaboration can really go hand in hand with this sort of like superior sextile. So one of the things that I was sitting with this day is just Mars gearing out for like, yes, I'm frustrated. Yes, things didn't go as planned, but what's my plan? And I think that just comes with the territory of being in Gemini. But what do you have to say about today, Kyle?
I might be like a little more dubious than you about it, though it's funny because I'm actually looking at the image. He kind of looks like he's about to like, yeah, I'm going to fucking snort some like chili powder or whatever. Like,
yes.
That's a good idea. Oh, fuck, that wasn't actually. Like,
oh my God.
I don't know what he's doing exactly, but is he eating?
He is chewing on a pencil.
Or snort some chili powder. I don't know. But yeah, Mars to me looks like it's trine Pluto, it's sextile the Sun, and it's hanging out with Jupiter. It's juiced up and it's not interfered with, but it doesn't necessarily have like default great ideas yet. Like it's like, like maybe if I snort this chili powder, I'll, get real fucked up, or I'll get real, whatever powerful. Like there's ways that I don't always love being on the same side as Mars. Like it's great to be not Mars's enemy, but like, you could be sometimes being friends with a mobster can get you in as much trouble.
Yeah.
Being like it's you could get you into some bad positions if you follow the lead too much. I think it's nice that the Sun is a lot stronger. The general direction things are pointing towards is more solar. I don't love the Pluto opposition, obviously, with the Sun. Kind of can add to some of that like intensity level, that like wanting to take things like just being a little too extreme. And Jupiter confirming Mars, saying like, yeah, you can do anything, bro. Like, I don't know if my only it's gonna feel a lot better, I think, than like the last month and a half of Mars has felt.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but that's where my optimism is really coming from.
Yeah,
it's just like in context, probably a lot better. But yes, I definitely hear you on that. And actually, this pairs very well with something that we were talking about last week on Jupiter Day. Because last week we were dealing with Jupiter-Venus sextile, and we were going on about how Venus can really help Jupiter and sifting through the bad ideas and then showing the ideas that are really good and really work. But maybe Mars coming into the picture now is kind of doing a little bit of the opposite. It's kind of like, yes, Venus said this, but wouldn't it be so cool if we did this instead? So maybe one of these plans that Mars is brewing right now is definitely going to come to fruition, and we have to just sit and wait to see what that's going to be. Yeah. I've made a Jupiter-Mars talisman before, and it definitely was not a great idea. So maybe we'll see how that goes.
But Jupiter told me it was a good idea. No, it's
Yeah, Jupiter told me it was a good idea. It was for a little bit, and then it wasn't.
yeah.
But okay, so as far as difficulty goes for today, I think I would give today. It doesn't seem very difficult for Mars, especially with that Sun sextile. I think I'd give it like a 2 as far as difficulty goes. What would you give agency?
Make it 2, maybe just because it's supported. I don't know if like it'll be super effective per se, but it'll feel like you can do a lot.
All right, so we're settling at a 2-2 for today. I love those matched scales. Feels good. All right, moving on, we go to our Wednesday, a very similar image, almost by design. It was literally by design. So today is July 24th, or Wednesday, Mercury's day. Mercury is currently in Leo, Peregrine, out of their element, in Mars's decan, and exchanging terms with Mars, while slowing down, getting ready for that Mercury retrograde that everybody is going to be talking about.
This one's like a little, not as bad as last week, but you know, it's coming off of that square with Uranus, conjunct Algol. He kind of looks like he's looking back like, what the fuck did you say to me, bro? Like he looks like a little bit like he's still feeling a little defensive, maybe. So there could be like, it still feels a little combative to me. Not necessarily conflicty, but just like tense and grudgy.
Especially after coming off of last week, because last week's image, Mercury was already in this brooding mood, and now it's kind of even more intense. It's like, I'm going to have to come back here, so I'm going to make sure that you know I'll be back here, sort of thing. One of the other things that I really wanted to lean on with this image is just the sense of determination from Mercury too, because like, yes, we're in this heavy Mercury-Mars space, but Mercury will get to go into Virgo, be in domicile / exalted, and then go back into Leo. And to me, that felt like this gearing up. Like, yes, like this place that I'm in, I'm not well equipped to deal with this, and I know that I'll have to redo this. So let me just go home real quick, and I'll grab a couple tools, and then we'll fight again.
Yeah, I think the like tenacious quality it is with approaching the Regulus orb. You know, it's hanging out with a pretty powerful fixed star at this point. It's ruling both Jupiter and Mars. It feels pretty strong and determined. I think the question is whether or not that determination is used towards changing things or digging in your heels, because that direction shift is coming. And I could see there being for some people like, but no, I was right, or no, this is the way that I should do it, and like not really wanting to take the changes that are coming.
And I think that that's very likely to happen, especially because Mercury going retrograde, of course, will have Mercury changing phase as well with the sun, and Mercury will go from being a nocturnal planet to a diurnal planet, and I think that feels very diurnal Mercury in Leo in the last decade. It's like, I was right. Here's all the data. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so difficulty, I think today, probably a pretty difficult day. Not as in, like, it's hard, but it might just be a day that requires a lot of mental power to get through.
I would say, like, a little bit, I wouldn't say overly difficult, but like a little bit less agency, maybe. Like, I feel like the expectations, Mercury's expectations of itself are higher, maybe, than like what it is actually equipped for just right now. And there could be like some problems that come from like stubbornly holding on to. Well, I said I was going to do all this shit. I'm going to do it. But you actually made more work for yourself than you needed to. So I'd give it like a 3 difficulty to agency, maybe.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And again, I think to that point, with Mercury going into a mutable sign, I think that if we're ready to kind of embrace that mutability, like the plan that you have right now and the determination that you have right now will not translate well to the actual plan that will be executed later on. So just keep that fire burning, but don't commit to the path yet. Things will certainly change a little bit. And I think it's also important to bring in the fixed star that's right there where Mercury is, which is Regulus. And one of the big warnings with the Regulus is this idea of hubris and how hubris can be very damaging as we push towards victory and conquest and all of those things. And I think that that's one of the things that we can say Mercury is kind of vying for right now. All right, moving forward to our Thursday. This is July 25th, 2024. It is our Jupiter day. Jupiter still in detriment in his element, and Mars is decadent in Venus's terms, and applying towards the Saturn square that we already kind of alluded to last week, because Saturn is within orb already, allows us to see the kind of like writing in the wall. Like Saturn is approaching, and we're approaching Saturn. It's a mutual application. We're both moving towards this square. We can see the trouble in the horizon. This is a very interesting build up in the narrative of Jupiter, because last week we were dealing with that Jupiter-Venus sextile like we were talking about, and we kind of had Venus remind us of what the path to success is like for Jupiter. We talked about how Jupiter may be tempted by Mars to try different things, but I think one of the reasons why that might be, especially considering that Jupiter-Mars conjunction that we've talked about will also feature a square to Saturn, is that we can start to feel that there's something big coming up, and then the Mars temptation will be like, yes, maybe we do have to resort to these other plans, even though we're pretty solid on the original one. I think that the image kind of, I was trying to bring about that sensation of being able to see the trouble at hand, but it's still far enough that it's not something that is very immediate. Last week with Jupiter walking down this hall, this infinite hall full of paintings, kind of like maybe thinking that all the documents and all the bureaucracy and all of the data that Jupiter had to sift through was over, and we can get to just like enjoy this nice infinite gallery. But then this week we see a ship in the horizon carrying a mountain of papers. And I think that that can feel very deflating, I guess. I think that that's kind of the challenge of the day. But Mars can also bring some of the verve and the energy to Jupiter to actually maybe attempt to sift through all of those things. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe that's not a good idea. It's too soon to tell. But what do you feel?
Yeah, there's definitely like a pinch coming for Jupiter. It's not fully present yet, but it's like you can kind of see like I got this grin that Jupiter has on its face starting to fade a little bit, like the like pressure to act or to like decisively commit to a long-term maybe plan of action is like a sort of coming, like part of how Jupiter is able to like boost things right now has to do with like that some degree non-committal, like, well, you know, we still have time to do this, we still have time to do this, like we can change things or we can adapt, but like the moments where things become decisive is like building for Jupiter. It's like well, we can change it, you know, here at some point in the future isn't gonna cut it for a while or at soon. There's still room to maneuver, but the runway's sort of running out. It's like, well, we're still figuring it out, and the time to figure it out is running out.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I think we've been pretty, not negative necessarily, but we're kind of focusing on some of the challenges here with good reason. But I think that one thing, if anyone in the audience is feeling anxious about this, because I know last week was Mars Uranus, this week we're already talking about Jupiter, Saturn square. I think to curb the anxieties, it's good to remember that Jupiter is in his own element. So Jupiter does have triplicity in there. And one of the big things with triplicity dignity is being able to tap into the support system. Like triplicity is the only type of dignity that has a team of planets collaborating over providing for a sign. So I think one of the ways to maybe mitigate or to navigate some of these challenges that are kind of like in the horizon, especially as we're talking about them much earlier than they're actually coming, is tapping into your community, into your resources. And like, yes, Jupiter is alone in this, at this shore, looking at all this pile of paper and documents and data coming his way. But he doesn't have to be alone. Maybe he can just call a couple of his buddies. And we can all take a chunk of this trouble together, and that can feel a lot less overwhelming.
I I agree, and I mean, a lot of this is just like how things are moving in the world, and not necessarily descriptive of everything about your life. These things happen around us, and sometimes we find ourselves in those stories to varying degrees. But I think like whatever's happening, it's always helpful to just know like, that's the way things are moving right now. And like while it's like, yeah, the storm's coming, like there's time to maneuver now. But like this is kind of the time. And this is the time to like make those assessments and prepare. Jupiter, it's gonna be in a rougher spot, next week and the week after than it is right now, but we still got some nice time. It's still got that nice sextile with Venus separating a little bit, but almost like not leaning into the part of it that feels good too much, like using that to as a boost, as like it still feels good to work on this project, even though I feel the pressure building. Taking advantage of that space is what I would recommend.
Yeah, definitely. And even also thinking about how Saturn, which is kind of like the trouble that we're alluding to right now, is part of that triplicity team that provides for Jupiter and Gemini. So maybe a good way to think about this is even like, how can I collaborate with the trouble itself? How can
Yeah.
I use this troublesome situation to my benefit? And to do that, you will have to come face to face with those troubles, and there's a lot of acceptance that has to come with that. But it's not impossible. I think that it's just good to remember that.
Yeah.
On that note, I think today, despite us alluding to some of these difficulties, is not necessarily a difficult day. I think it's difficult if you let yourself be in the worry, but if you're able to center yourself, I think it can be a lot more manageable. I would give it
Yeah.
a 3 also in difficulty, especially considering how tough last week was. This feels pretty manageable.
Yeah. I would say that I like this Thursday because it's a sweet spot of where you can kind of see the storm coming, but you have time to manage and still like resources to do it. Uh,
Yeah.
it's, and you can see where the pinches are coming from. Mars isn't like sneaking up on Jupiter. Jupiter knows that Mars is coming. It can see Saturn coming. It sees everything. It has like the perspective on everything right now. Is good for making plans for when pinches do come, as they do, and then they go away.
Yeah, for sure. I think today's a 3 in difficulty. I'm If you're willing to work with people on this, it can be even a 4 agency, I think.
It's a more productive day than it is difficult.
Yeah, it's not so much a day for kind of trying to get to the problem before the problem even arrives. It's more so a day to resource yourself for when that problem does come. All right, so let's move on to our next day. That is our Friday. Venus is still in Leo. She is out of her element, Peregrine, in Jupiter's decan and in Saturn's terms, and she's receiving a moon trine. We've been talking about Venus in Leo. We started with a pretty difficult image for Venus in Leo. Last week's was a little bit more liberating, and I think that this kind of continues the trend of a more liberated Venus in Leo. The only difference is that now she is more so in Saturn's terms rather than her own, and I think that that can bring again some of the more difficult experiences that Venus can have in Leo. But the interesting thing is that all of that is happening within that Jupiter decan, which is such a victorious and celebratory decan in Leo. And so the thing that I was working with this one, especially with the moon trine, is Venus's ability to turn some of that difficulty and some of that heat or that excess heat into a spectacle for people to see and distract themselves with and applaud her, and even she can even use some of that recognition towards resourcing herself for the rest of her journey in Leo. That I think it's even interesting to consider that Venus in Leo, if we put Leo rising, it would be the ruler of the 10th and the 1st. And so that sort of using visibility or using your name as a resource, I think is It's a very ruler of the 10th and the 1st sort of thing. And it's nice to have that moon trine. It really is a bit of support. I think I said this before in the show, but I'm a huge proponent of the sun and the moon both being equally dignified in Cancer and Leo. I feel like that there's a lot of conceptual leg to that idea. And to have the sun in Leo and the moon trine to Venus in Leo does provide the luminary support to Venus. It's like it's that spotlight coming onto Venus and her being able to use that in her favor.
To me, this like seems like sometimes the best thing you can do is be chill. Like, I don't know, oh, the power went out. There's a plumbing issue, whatever. You can be like, oh, fuck, what a pain in the ass. Today feels kind of like a good day to like just enjoy the day at the beach, or like doesn't have to be about anything big or towards a big goal or project. It's a nice, easy Friday.
Yeah, it feels celebratory, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to that, I think difficulty is a 1 for today. I don't really think that this is a difficult day at all. And agency, I think I would also, despite Venus being fairly peregrine, like she really has no dignity whatsoever going on there, I think having the support of the luminaries adds a very palpable sense of agency. It's like you have the king and queen by your side. Even though you're not home, you're friends with royalty. You can get away with a lot when that's the case. So I think I would go difficulty 1, agency, not 5, but a 4. Feels comfortable.
Yeah. We get like a good 3, 4. Like it doesn't seem like a huge, like a day you need to like grab by the horns per se. That like some of the strength or power or agency in it is in like leaning into ease a little bit, which can be powerful in its own right. You can do a lot to bring like a workforce together, like a team together by like having a picnic, team building exercises.
All right, so moving on to our next day. This is Saturday. Conceptually, one of my favorite images of the week. We have Saturn still in Pisces, peregrine out of his element, in Mercury's terms, and in Jupiter's decan, and applying to the Jupiter square that we keep talking about.
And I think a lot of what we end up dealing with Saturn and Jupiter really is the wider perspective of things. That can look like a larger perspective on our lives as a whole, but also just looking at the world, like reading the news, watching what's happening, as we're already feeling now. And I imagine probably even more so by this week, world's going to be weird. It's just going to be weird for a while. And I think as Jupiter approaches that square with Saturn, Saturn is like increasingly in a position to, its demands are getting louder. Like, define for me what is. Like, I want to know how things work. And Jupiter's answer isn't necessarily changing. It's just more and more clear that like, well, this is how things are going to be. Kind of weird and stormy. There's just settling into it, I think, which if you can do that, you can, manage your participation in the news cycle or whatever it is that gives you grief about, the promise of the future. I think it can easily be a chill, nice Saturday. I don't know.
This was also one of the images that I kind of was building up on the story of the past few weeks. So for the past few weeks, we're dealing with Saturn being bored and kind of over the whole Pisces thing. And then last week we had Saturn reminiscing on Capricorn days or his Capricorn lover. Now I was trying to have Saturn kind of trying to go back home. Like, I had this nice memory. Maybe I can find my way back home. And that's kind of like that Saturn retrograde feel. But then the path back home looks absolutely not good. We might never get there. Realistically, we probably won't, because Saturn is not going to go back to Capricorn anytime soon. But one of the things that I was feeling with the Jupiter square, and even something that we already talked about, is that Jupiter and Saturn are on the same team. Even though it's a square, it's challenging. They're on the same team. They're willing to collaborate and work together. And so this image to me was almost like Saturn, this old lady in this little boat trying to get back home, and then she prays for a sign from the gods that be, and then a lightning strikes. Even though the clouds look very troublesome, the path back looks absolutely um, tenebrous. It might feel like something that's the end of the world, but it will be showing you the new path. In a
Yeah.
way, that's not literal. It will be the sort of like, was that a sign? Was that not a sign? But it's still giving you some sort of direction, even if it's many directions at once.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of that direction could just be to like refocus on what you can control, which is like within your own internal world. There's definitely that middle decan of Pisces is, I would say, this is a very kind of like Zen, like finding like this
Totally.
clean way of connecting to like both your own life and to the spirit world. There's like a holistic sort of world life spirituality equilibrium that's trying to be achieved in the middle decan of Pisces that Saturn can certainly make things too serious and dire to like achieve. But like some of that Jupiter, I think, square while tense can like clarify maybe to some degree, help give some clarity of like, yes, all these things are possible out here. The chances that any of those things will affect you directly is, maybe minimal, or maybe that one will, but this one probably won't.
But on that note, how difficult is today, Kyle?
Uh, 2, 3. It's not too bad. It's
Yeah, I
still
don't think it's bad either.
dealing more with Jupiter than it is with Mars at this point. It's easy still to like find equilibrium within the eye of the storm rather than getting swept up in it. So yeah, stay in the calm center, and
Yeah.
all will be well.
Yeah. And to that, I think agency might be low, but I don't think that's a troublesome thing. I think that's just a thing that, again, we've been talking about this almost every
Yeah,
week with Saturn. So let's go with like a 2-1 sort of thing. It's not too difficult, so you don't need all that agency, but if anything, you can use today to settle into that lack of agency in a comfortable way. Cool. So moving on to the last day of our week. This is, of course, our Sunday. Sun is at home, and Saturn's decan in Jupiter's terms, and is sextile to Mars. Simple day. This one was an interesting image. I was thinking, it's kind of hard to tell what I was kind of going on with this one, but because we're dealing with the sun, I always like to just like look at that planet as if it were the first house. The sun is in Leo, then so Leo is the first house, and then Scorpio would be the fourth house of that, and Mars being sextile to the sun, I feel can bring some of that fourth houseness thing to it. And that's kind of what I was drawing on. Especially being Mars in a mercurial sign, the topic of business and trade felt very, very relevant for me. But this looks like a strange sort of trade that's happening. I was thinking of almost like the sun has just purchased the home. It was like a great deal. But then the realtor is a little bit, looks a little horny, I guess. Looks a little questionable. I don't know. Certain things feel uncomfortable. Why do you need to sell me a house shirtless? That's this is a big question going on here. But I got a great deal out of it, so I don't know if I'm that upset about this exchange. It's like opportunities for trade and agreements, but the person that you're trading with seems a little sketchy. What do you feel, Kyle?
yeah. I think especially with the sun sort of separating from that opposition with Pluto, and like even just the decan that the sun is in the first decan of Leo, which does sort of focus on the side of things you can see and the maintenance of that side as opposed to the side you can't. The ulterior motives of others sort of leaking through, but you can kind of choose which side of that is like relevant to you, or like which side of that you actually want to engage with. I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of power in that.
totally. The sun has the upper hand in this situation, regardless.
Yeah. Like not even just which side do I want to present, but like which side do I want to focus on with other people? Like, yeah, I heard that guy is a terrible dad and abandoned his children, whatever, but he always writes the best reports at work, and I always understand what they mean, and like we get along well at work, and like I don't really care about that. It's not relevant to me. It's only
Yeah.
relevant to the degree that it intersects with where I meet them. Feel very solid. Like this would be a good like solar election, probably. Really, if you got like just sunrise, it's going to be the day and hour of the sun. The moon's exalted, sun's in domicile. Like nothing bad's happening to the sun other than the loose opposition now with Pluto. It's a good solar day.
Yeah, it is certainly a good solar day. And to that, the sun might even be flattered by the Mars
Sure.
situation. Maybe we
Yeah,
can
like
just get a little experimental for a second.
yeah, the sun in Leo is nice for like having just a real solid sense of self of like that could feel threatening in some cases of like, oh God, like I'm gonna feel pressure from the other person to move this way or that way or do this or that. Especially with like the sextile with Mars, like um it's the king with like the general at his right hand. Like
Yeah.
I know my power and like I'll fuck you up if I need to. Like go
Yeah,
ahead.
totally.
Yeah. It feels very strong today. Very solid. If you want to throw your weight around on something, like today's a good day for it.
Yeah,
Good boss
totally.
boss energy.
And I think too, like with Mars being in Gemini, there's this sort of like non-committal thing to Mars as well. Like, yes, maybe the Mars person is being a little sketchy, but they're not being sketchy perpetually. It's kind of just like a slightly sketchy moment where maybe they just tried one of those Mars and Gemini plans just for the shits and giggles, and maybe it landed, maybe it didn't. It looks like
Yeah.
it did.
I think what's awesome about Mars and Gemini is like the strategic capacity and like the ability to maneuver and adapt to changing circumstances.
Yeah.
So that could be like, ooh, yeah, maybe I'm into this, or I'm just going to move away from this. And even kind of, I don't know, talk your way into or out of difficult situations rather than engaging directly, maybe in conflict.
Yeah, for sure. And to that, I think today is also like a very masculine day. And I think that's also what I was going with
Full
the
macho.
image where, yeah, where we can be very direct about these things. It's just like, yes, I like this. No, I don't like this.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sure.
There's no need to meander and do the whole lunar thing. We're in solar terms right now.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So difficulty. I think today is an easy day. I think it's probably the easiest day we're gonna get in a long time. So I'll go with a 1. How do you feel about that?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually, I would say, one of the better like days of the month. Like it's a really nice day, and I might do something with this one actually.
Yeah, totally. I'm
Wanted to
certainly
ask
doing
the sun
something with this
for-
one.
Yeah. If you ask the sun for some solar stuff, the sun will deliver.
Oh yeah. Cool. And as far as agency goes, I will max this one out. I feel like the sun is super dignified. I love that Mars in Gemini is most available or like can really witness Aries, which is the sun's exaltation sign. And so that or really kind of brings some of that to the sun as well. It just feels like a
Yeah.
very fiery, hot, forward going day.
Yeah. But it's all,
That's
I think what I like about sextiles in general is that they're not like mandatory. Like Mars is there at my disposal, but I don't have to like use it if I don't
Mhm.
want to. While trines will like get all over each other, and squares for sure. Just they run into each other all the time. Sextiles are like optional. Like, oh, you can do this if you want to. Nah,
Yeah.
no, not into it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's a really nice way to conclude our week. This was our planetary horoscopes for the week of what was the first day of this week? I don't even remember. For this week, whatever week we posted this video, this is the week that we're covered. If you want to book a reading with me, you can find me at mercuryrising.com. If you want to book a reading with Kyle, you can find Kyle at kylepierceastrologer.com. And with that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. All right.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Good week.